Greetings to all of you, dear souls. We are here delving into Ashthavakra Gita, which is a dialogue between King Janaka and Ashthavakra. We have done the first 7 verses already in the first 2 parts of chapter 1, and right now we head towards the 8th verse. Ashthavakra uvachaha aham kartetyaham mana Mahakrishna hidam shita naham karteti vishwasamritam pitva sukhi bhava. You have been bitten by the black snake of egoism. I am the doer. Drink the nectar of faith. I am not the doer, and be happy. This is the translation of the 8th verse. Let's understand this. So one's sense of doership comes from the ignorance that I do this and I do that. I want this and I want that. So Ashthavakra here is talking about this ego as a serpent. The black serpent is the ego, he says. It unleashes its poison, which is the sense of doership, which is what we feel that I am doing this and I am doing that. So when bitten and infected by that poison, the seeker becomes possessed and commits the gravest of all sins, which is the identification with the I or the ego mind. A human being is inherently sinless, and no sin can touch him, because if you identify yourself as pure consciousness, the consciousness is inherently sinless. It is only the identification with the body, mind, ego which causes him and those around him much misery. So whatever we do based out of the identification with the body, mind or the ego is what is causing misery to self and others. The black serpent, the ego, casts a spell on him, and in that hypnotic trance he dances to the tune of that which has no independent existence. So this is what the ego does to us, and we are dancing to the tune of that ego. Ashthavakra advises the seeker to drink the nectar of faith. Faith is such a critical component and an almost instant remedy to dehypnotize himself. So what we need to do here is to dehypnotize, to de-learn. The sadhak must consciously and continuously maintain, I am not the doer, and surrender everything to Mother Consciousness, no matter what appears, whether good or bad. It is true that faith cannot be cultivated as it is a gift of grace. Nevertheless, it is important to understand and believe, at least at the intellectual level, that one is not the doer. When such a mental assertion is made, then an aspirant in due course begins to experience a sweet nectar flowing in his spiritual heart. This helps him to remove more firmly stabilized at the spiritual heart, where, through deeper meditations, he is able to witness the disappearance of mind, breath and prana, or the life force, and with them disappears the black serpent of the ego. So this is what Ashthavakra is advising Janaka to do. He says that the sense of doership that we have is the arrogant ego which is expressing itself through our perceptions, feelings, thoughts. When we say, I see, I feel, I hear, I think, and so on. So he further clarifies that when we have these false attitudes arise out of our identification with the sense organs, which is the eyes, ears, mind and the intellect. So seeing, hearing, feeling and thinking are really the functions of the eyes, ears, mind or intellect. As the self, you are but the illuminator of these functions, which really belong to the different equipments. So there is no need to arrogate that I am the doer. That becomes the essence of the ego. So the trick here is, he says, the only remedy here is to unlearn or dehypnotize ourselves by consciously maintaining the wisdom that I am not the doer. And this is to be constantly maintained with ardent faith, This mental assertion is a specific cure for the poison of ego. So he's referring to the ego as a poison, as a snake, and therefore it is compared here, consciousness is compared here, or the lack of doership that we need to understand, that I'm not the doer, is compared here with nectar or the life-giving ambrosia. Ashtavakra uvachaha eko vishuddhabodhoham iti nischaya vahinnana prajvalya jnana gahanam vitashokaha sukhi bhava. In the next verse, Ashtavakra talks about the next issue, the next thing, which is to burn down the forest of ignorance with the fire of understanding, that I am the one pure awareness, and be happy and free from distress. So this is the 9th verse. He says that the forest of ignorance symbolizes the causal state of nothingness. This is purely an experiential state that an aspirant reaches in deep meditation. When you keep going back into meditation, and you keep shedding off the different layers of your outer layers, superficial layers, the body, the mind, and all of that, you reach this causal state of absolute void or the nothingness, which is beyond the gross body, the subtle body, lies this causal state. So it is a state of darkness and silence. Yet it is also a state of ignorance, because the ego is still intact. So the nothingness is experienced, but the ego is still there. It is the most vulnerable of all states in meditation, as a sadhak can easily get lost here within the void. So most sadhaks remain stuck in the void. It is compared to a dark and silent forest, where a seeker can easily lose his way. Confusion and fear plague his mind. This is why the presence of a guru is essential at this stage. Many people feel that when they reach the stage of nothingness or the void, they have achieved awakening or enlightenment. But that's the most darkest point, and there is further on, and a guru can really help here. Because the guru's guidance can help the seeker transcend this fearful and challenging state, which Ashtavakra refers to as the dark forest. Through proper instruction and grace, consciousness, the mind, drops into the navel effortlessly. The navel here is symbolic of the fire element or the Agni, so burning away of the ego. Once consciousness drops to the navel, the seeker will instantly become one with everything. So there is that sense of oneness between consciousness and you, and that state of nothingness becomes filled with consciousness. The seeker will instantly become one with everything. The entire world will be no different from him. There will be no division between him and everything else in the entire universe. The body disappears, all names disappear, and all kinds of form disappear. And this is the state of total samadhi. He becomes one with the universe. Later, even the universe becomes small in comparison with you, and is seen as rising and falling at the spiritual heart, as if the universe emanates out of you. So you become far more expansive than the entire universe and have the feeling that you are its creator. You hold the universe within you. There is no greater happiness for you to know than that this universe is born out of you, and that you are the source of all. At this point, let's understand the concepts of knowledge, consciousness, and ignorance a little better. The knowledge that we gather through our restless intellect is the world of time and space, and of the various modifications happening in a web of the cause-effect relationship that we are all a part of, the whole karmic world. When through sadhana, the intellect becomes calmer and quieter, it automatically turns inward to experience therein the dynamic silence of a spiritual space or a spiritual peace. When we reach that point of serene intellect, contemplating subjectively upon the self within, That is the purified intellect. A clean intellect alone can come to apprehend in meditation the infinite self. So, this is the purest part of the intellect. So, the knowledge of the world outside is gathered for each one of us by our sense organs, mind, and intellect. Only when the consciousness in us comes to illumine them. Where consciousness is not, as in a block of stone or a piece of wood, there is no knowledge. Where consciousness is, knowledge also is. Therefore, consciousness is often equated with knowledge. At this moment, our consciousness is always sullied by the presence of the objects of our experience. So, what we're trying to say here is that when the knowledge that we have mixed with consciousness, consciousness gets sullied because of the external knowledge, what we're attaching to that consciousness. But consciousness of objects is the knowledge of objects. And consciousness of objects devoid of the objects would be the purest form of consciousness. And that is what we are referring to as pure knowledge, or Vishuddha Buddhi, or Vishuddha Bodh, purest form of knowledge, which is just consciousness alone. So, on transcending the body-mind equipment, the seeker in meditation comes to experience this particular state of I am that one pure consciousness. When a seeker gets himself established in this experience of pure consciousness, the fire of certitude, as declared by Ashthavakra, will burn down the forest of ignorance within the meditator. So this is what he's saying, that try to get that, stay away from the knowledge of objects and go into the purest form of knowledge, which is the knowledge of consciousness, to be able to get rid of the ignorance or the dark forest of ignorance. And this is what the summary of the verse is. Ashtavakra uvachaha yatra vishwamidam bhati kalpitam rajjusarvata ananda parmananda sabodhastvam sukham bhava. In the 10th verse, Ashtavakra further talks about, after having discussed what consciousness is, he explains the concept of joy. He says that joy in which all this appears and is imagined like seeing a snake in a rope, that supreme joy and awareness is what you are. So be happy. Just to explain this verse further, Ashtavakra declares that you are the supreme joy itself. Supreme joy means all pleasures are pale in comparison to what is experienced as your true sense of I amness. This is a state of tremendous joy which is inconceivable and unimaginable. This is referred to as Sat Chit Anand because it is the state of complete Gyan or true knowledge. Sat is the truth, Chit is the consciousness, and Anand is joy. So it's a pure, unadulterated state of consciousness and supreme joy. It is here in this state that a sadhak gets knowledge of the true source of I amness. The seeker learns that it originates from the spiritual heart, from where waves of bliss rise and fall. You explode with such intensity that there comes the feeling, I am the creator of this entire universe, which is what we say in Sanskrit as Aham Brahmasmi. Just I am the creator of this entire universe. That thought arises in the sadhak or the spiritual aspirant. The source or the substratum is this joy, and the universe is only a superimposition on that joy. You exist beyond this entire universe, but in your ignorance you have completely failed to look at the source. So basically, our basic nature is like that of a child, which is joy. And on top of that basic foundation that we have of joy, the universe and all its emotions and experiences are superimposed. However, we forget that at the base, at the foundation, we are joy, we are happiness, we have Satchit Anand. And we tend to forget that and go with that superimposition, which is the universe and its drama, that we forget our inherent nature. So, Ashtavakra says that we have all mistakenly identified with that unreal superimposition as the real world. But once the substratum is apprehended, the illusory superimpositions will immediately disappear, and the delusion of the snake will end with the awareness that it is, in truth, only a rope. Hence, Ashtavakra enjoins the seeker to arrive at such awareness and be supremely happy. So he's urging King Janak to say, and says that go to the substratum, and there you will find pure joy. That is who you really are. And don't identify with the unreal superimposition of the world, which you think is the reality. And just go to the foundation, the source, and that is who you are. You are supremely joyous and happy always. Ashtavakra uvachaha Muktabhimani mukto hi badho badhabhimanyapi kim vadanti satyayam ya matihi sa gatir bhavet. In the next verse, Ashtavakra explains the importance of thought and thinking. He says, if one thinks of oneself as free, one is free. And if one thinks of oneself as bound, one is bound. Here the saying, thinking makes it so, is true. Let's understand this a little bit more in detail. It is a well-known saying that as we think, so we become. Thoughts dictate our lives. We experience everything through thought. Thought is the starting point for everything that manifests in our lives. Hence, our sense of being and how we feel is usually dictated by our thoughts. If we smell success in something, we feel good. If we think we will fail, we do not feel good. If we anticipate future trouble, we will experience pain, mental or physical. And if we think everything will work out well, we will be happy or at peace. So thoughts are dominating our experiences and feelings. It is thought that feeds what we actually feel. A good thought naturally helps us feel good, to feel happy, and a bad thought creates a mental or physical disturbance. We must therefore try and think as positively as we can and avoid negativity as much as possible. This effort will enrich our lives and the lives of those around us. Because thought is energy. When it becomes forceful and strong enough, which is in the direction of positive or negative, it becomes matter and can help or harm the aspirant and others. So if we understand it from quantum physics also, thought is an energy form. That energy form manifests itself as matter, and either depending on the positive or negativity of the thought, that is how it will aspirant, and that is how it will manifest, and that is how it will affect us. So the first step is to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. By thinking good thoughts and by being good, you will always feel good. However, there is a second step here, and that is to go much deeper to a second level. Here you trace back to the origin, the source of the thought itself. So what do you have to do that? You take one step back from all thoughts and start to observe yourself and become a witness of your thoughts. You bring yourself to the center prior to what rises and falls by way of thoughts, emotions, and memories. So this is what we had discussed in one of our earlier verses also, that we go back into the consciousness state, go back into the background. Look at the thoughts that are coming up in the foreground. Just as we have the sky in the background and the clouds coming up in the foreground, we can be that witness, be that sky, and stand in the background and look at these thoughts. And when we are able to look at those thoughts from that center point, we will be able to identify also each and every thought and the connection to a certain emotion or a memory. And that's where a lot of information will come to us. And we will be able to find that pleasant or unpleasant events, happenings, or experiences will not touch our sense of being, and that we will be happy all the time. You will no longer be affected by any thought, emotion, fear, or memory. Like clouds, everything will pass by without remaining with you for long. If you're the sky just watches it, and the clouds come and the clouds go. There will only be one thought, and that will be, I am joy. I am ever new joy is the only thought that you will know. And then that's when you become that supreme joy. So in the previous verse, Ashtavakra spoke about joy. Now he goes to the thought level and asks, shows us in fact how to reach that state of joy. Then it becomes real meditation, where consciousness becomes aware of only itself and nothing else. So it's like a full circle. You start from consciousness. You are in the background, which is in consciousness. You're looking at the thoughts, and you're able to see that now the thoughts are not impacting you. And the only thing that you become aware of is that you, the observer, are the observed. And that's when the whole circle gets completed, and the consciousness becomes aware of itself and nothing else. This is what Ashtavakra means when he says, as you think, so you become. It is about direct experience and not a mere mental affirmation. In today's new age time, everybody's talking about positive affirmations. It's not about the affirmation or the thought behind it. It's the sense of going in the background, moving beyond thoughts, and reaching that state where it is beyond affirmations, where you become aware of consciousness itself. This is in direct contrast to the new Neo-Advaita teaching, which declares that you are free right at this very moment, and there is nothing to do with respect to any sadhana except holding the highest truth. This is merely another mental concept, so we have to free ourselves from these mental concepts. So the Bhagavad Gita sums this up very beautifully and says, in which Lord Krishna says to Arjun, he says, O son of Kunti, the fate of man after death is decided by the thought that predominates in the moment of death. That thought is the foundation on which the next birth is built. This is how important the thought is. So note here that the Lord says it is that one predominant thought which determines the state of a seeker. So if your most dominant thought is that of joy and bliss, then this will be your fate, free of all sufferings arising from identification with the ego. However, it is important to realize that this final dominant thought at death is hardly going to be one of joy and bliss if you are habituated to thinking negatively and have remained identified with your body and mind. That is why it is so important that the constant repeated thought is with the source or the foundation that we are, or the substratum, which is pure consciousness. And if you are in that state, you are automatically in a state of I am joy, I am supreme joy. And that will be the predominant thought pattern, the thought that is going to be there. We don't know when death is going to strike us. So if we constantly remember that as our state, our predominant thought is that of joy, then the next birth will be decided based on that thought. Because nobody gets time to prepare to have the right thought for death. Death can strike at any time. However, we need to keep on practicing to stay in this state of supreme joy so that whenever we encounter death, we will automatically be caught at that point where we will be thinking of ourselves as nothing but supreme joy. So we will end it here with this beautiful thought of staying in this positive state of joy. And until next time, when I come back to you with more verses from Ashtavakra's Gita. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste.